What's up, people, and welcome back to another episode of Ghetto Gospel. So where we left off at. Last week, we talked about Laban finally catching up to Jacob and how he went through all that man's stuff trying to find his little ugly idols, claiming that Jacob stole them. When he ain't find them, Jacob went off on that man and let him have it for all of them years he was getting jerked around. The last thing we talked about was Jacob and Laban making a deal and promising to stay up off of each other's turf. And now we caught up. So Jacob then finally chunked the deuces at his uncle, and now he headed back to his hometown to see his pops in there. And the first thing it tell us in the chapter is that on his way, God's angels met up with him. And it don't tell us much about that meeting, except that he named that area where them angels met him at God's camp. I wish I had more than that, because the fact that it just say that up out of nowhere and then keep it pushing make it feel like it's something more important that's happening, but I ain't figured out what yet. Anyway, so the next verse say that Jacob sent some folks up ahead of him to meet up with his brother, and he was like,
now when y'all meet up with my brother, tell him I said, what's up, big bro? You know you got it. I've been staying with Laban, and I got held up.
It really say delayed, but I think held up is probably a pretty accurate entendre based on the different ways the word could translate and the fact that Laban had been cheating that man for years.
You know I done did alright for myself. I got some of this and some of that, so I just wanted to send you this message to make sure we good. We good, right?
So when Jacob's folks got back from meeting up with his brother, they was like,
yo, we met up with your brother Esau, and he coming to meet you. And that boy 40 deep. Oh, that ain't too bad. My bad, not 40. 400 deep.
So that boy Jacob was spooked, and so he split up his people, his flocks, all the herds, and everything he owned into two groups. That way, if that boy Esau showed up and gave him the business, at least one of them would get away. And then Jacob did what a lot of folks do when their consequences finally catch up to him. He got real holy and started praying like,
oh Lord, oh dear God, oh dear God, God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac. The same God who told me to come back to my hometown, and you was gonna throw me a bag and take care of me. Lord, I don't deserve how good you done been to me. When I crossed the river last time, all I had was my staff.
This kind of staff, not that kind of staff.
Nah, I done grew into two camps. Please rescue me from my brother Esau. Lord, I'm spooked. He might come and attack me and my wives and the children. Think of the children, Lord. Think of the children.
Somebody please think of the children.
Lord, you said you was gonna make sure I was straight and give me so many kids it'll be like the sand in the ocean. Way too many to count.
And then, just like what usually happens when somebody pray for God to save them from the consequences they created, God let that boy sweat a little bit. So while he was spending the night at the spot where they stopped at, he pulled out a nice little chunk of animals from his flock, and then he broke them up and gave them to his slaves. And then he told the dude with the first group of animals,
now go on ahead of me. We'll put some space between the herds. And when my brother run up on y'all and ask what's up with these animals, where you going and who you with, tell him it's mine. It's a gift for him and that I'm right behind y'all.
And he told the second one and the third one and all the rest of them to say the same thing. So after he sent them gifts on ahead of himself, he stayed back in the camp for the night. So later that night, he took his two wives and his two slave women, essentially his legal side chicks, and his 11 kids and crossed the river. And then he sent them on ahead with all the stuff he owned. And the next verse say something that come way out of left field. It say Jacob was all by himself, and a man wrestled with him until the sun started coming up. And if you like me, you probably like, who is this dude? Where he came from? Why they started wrestling? And we don't really get none of them answers. I guess they wasn't really important enough to say nothing about. If the answers to them questions wasn't important enough to mention, it must mean the stuff that's in there is way more important. And the next thing it say is that this dude who came out of nowhere couldn't beat Jacob, so he hit that boy in his hip and dislocated it. And I guess even with his hip dislocated, he still ain't let that man go. So homeboy was like,
let me go, bro. The sun coming up.
What the sun got to do with it? And Jacob was like,
I ain't letting you go until you bless me.
How Jacob gonna ask some random person to bless him? And how he know that blessing worth something? And the dude was like,
what your name is? Jacob. Your name ain't Jacob no more. It's gonna be Israel, because you done struggled with God and men and then won.
Now that's a quick aside, but it's kind of important. That word they use for struggle can mean like to wrestle with or to go against, but it could also mean to stick with or to not give up on. So I think in this case, it's probably a double entendre. So then Jacob asked homeboy what his name was, and he was like,
"What you want to know my name for?"
And then it say he blessed Jacob. And so he named that spot where they wrestled at Facing God, because he realized that he saw God face to face, but somehow he ain't died. And the blessing sound good, but that man also left with a blessing and a limp from what happened to his hip. So that's it for this week. If you don't know Jesus, but you trying to get to know him, go and click that first link in the description down there. I'll see y'all next week, and as always, peace, and I hope y'all people straight.